Everyone expected a routine hearing that morning on Capitol Hill, the kind where words bounce off polished wood panels and leave little behind but sound bites. But something in the air said otherwise. It wasn't loud or visible, just an undercurrent, a flicker in the eyes of staffers, the tightening grip on pens, the subtle way aides leaned closer to whispered updates. Chairs shifted, phones readied, reporters at the back row scribbled notes without enthusiasm, their minds trained to expect another rinse and repeat performance of political theater. But at the center of it all, Jasmine Crockett sat still, the only calm in the growing storm. She wasn't fiddling, she wasn't scrolling, she was arranging a folder, carefully aligning its corners, as if the order of the pages held something sacred. She waited, poised, and when the moment came, she adjusted her glasses with a motion that signaled quiet authority. She leaned into the mic. Her voice was calm, not cold, measured, not hesitant. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she said. And with that, the room changed. "I'd like to address what I believe is a serious misuse of public trust by a member of this chamber," she began. Her words were surgical, not sharp enough to draw gasps yet, but clean enough to cut. Heads turned, eyes blinked. Marjorie Taylor Greene's posture shifted by half an inch. Jasmine continued, "I'm referring to Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene and a series of financial inconsistencies that I believe merit public examination." Cameras zoomed in. Even the chairman's brow furrowed slightly, sensing something unplanned was about to unfold. Starting with campaign funds redirected to private interests under the names of two Georgia-based shell entities, Jasmine said, flipping to her first page. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words did the heavy lifting. A rustle moved through the room. Greene leaned forward, her voice cutting across the aisle with contempt. "You've got nothing but air." Jasmine didn't blink. She raised the file. "I have records, not rumors," she said, her words quiet but immovable. "And I'd appreciate it if I could finish without interruption." The chairman tapped his gavel once. "Order. Let the representative continue." Jasmine nodded once, respectfully, and turned the page. According to FEC records, she read, nearly $130,000 in campaign funds were directed to a consulting firm called Oak Star Strategies, which, by the way, doesn't appear to have a physical address. She let the silence breathe. "That's a legitimate firm and you know it," Greene retorted, her jaw tightening. "No, I don't know it," Jasmine replied, glancing briefly toward her. "Because after 3 calls, 2 dead phone lines, and a Freedom of Information request, I still can't find a single human being tied to it." That's when the current shifted. You could feel it. Behind her, a young staffer began typing furiously on a tablet. Camera operators exchanged glances. Tweets started flying, but Jasmine didn't look up. Additionally, she said, "There's a reimbursement request for a trip to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. 3 nights, 5-star lodging, private flights, all labeled as strategy sessions." "You're twisting facts," Greene snapped. That trip was cleared. Jasmine didn't flinch. "I have flight logs, Marjorie," she said gently. "Do you want me to read them?" The room had thickened with silence. Members of the committee began to shift in their seats. One coughed. Even the chairman looked uncertain about where this was going, but he didn't interrupt. Jasmine turned another page, but this time she didn't speak immediately. She let the silence do the work. When she finally looked up, her voice was quieter than before. "If the American people are funding luxury travel for private deals," she said, "they deserve to know. And if someone is lying about how their money is being spent, it is our duty to speak up." Greene clenched her fists. "You're playing politics. This is a witch hunt." Jasmine tilted her head. then you shouldn't be afraid of the truth. It wasn't a line for the cameras. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of sentence that held the weight of something larger. The room didn't gasp, it listened, and the next page in Jasmine's folder, the one she now turned to, made everything before it feel like a warm-up. This isn't just about donations or trips, Jasmine said. It's about credibility, about what people say behind closed doors when they think no one is listening. And I have transcripts. The word hit the room like a hammer. Greene's eyes widened. Transcripts of what? She demanded. Jasmine's voice remained even. Phone calls, she said. One dated March 9th, last year. Another in July. Both tied to conversations about funneling PAC money toward personal real estate. One of which was purchased in Flagler Beach, Florida. Somewhere in the gallery, someone gasped. You're lying, Greene shouted. This is fiction. Jasmine didn't argue. She pulled out a printout and passed it to the committee clerk. For the record, she said, turning to the chairman, I've submitted this to be added to the official hearing documents. These transcripts were vetted. 2 sources verified them before I agreed to read them aloud. Greene's face twitched. Nobody came to her defense. Not this time. In the March 9th call, Jasmine continued. Greene's aide mentions rerouting $20,000 from the Freedom Rising PAC to a private account under the name of a Florida-based LLC owned by her brother-in-law. I don't even have a brother-in-law, Greene yelled. Jasmine held up a page. His name is Ronald Edgerton, she said. Married to your husband's sister, Kendra. Records show the LLC, Bay Rise Investments, was founded 2 months before the wire transfer. I have the Florida State business filing right here. The silence that followed wasn't stunned, it was conclusive. One of Greene's staffers quietly exited the room. Another began texting furiously. Greene, rattled, pointed at Jasmine with trembling hands. You're a liar. A bold-faced, media-hungry liar. Jasmine didn't react. Then why did the bank flag the wire transfer? She asked calmly. Why is there a note about a fraud investigation being opened and then quietly closed 2 weeks later with no public record? She leaned back slightly. Because you thought nobody would look twice. But I did. The chairman looked around, hesitated, and then spoke. We need a 5-minute recess. Jasmine shook her head. No, we don't. I'm not done. And she wasn't. Her voice carried not just facts but finality. In July, she continued, there's another call. This time with a developer in San Diego. Same PAC, same shell company. This time it's a $50,000 consulting fee labeled under security advisement. But the man on the other end confirms they never met, never spoke, and had no contract. The chairman's mouth opened, then closed. Jasmine turned to him. Sir, these aren't accusations. These are documented transactions. We all sit in this room claiming to represent the people. But if we're not willing to investigate our own, what are we really doing here? She stood slowly, letting the question hang in the air like smoke. Greene sat frozen, lips tight, hands now still. The press outside had already begun writing headlines. But inside, the room was transforming. What began as politics had evolved into something heavier. Jasmine wasn't just holding papers. She was holding a mirror. And not everyone liked what they saw. But she didn't stop. Not when it got uncomfortable. Not when it got personal. Not even when the fire spread to every hallway in Capitol Hill. Jasmine reached for a thinner folder now. One marked in clean bold text. Private Travel Disbursements 2021 to 2023. She didn't raise it for dramatics, didn't wave it like a sword. She simply placed it on the table with the gravity of someone who understood exactly what was inside and how deep it cut. Her eyes met Greene's as she spoke again. Not louder but sharper. Let's talk about the trips, she said. The ones labeled as strategic meetings but linked to private donors, real estate brokers, and oddly, cryptocurrency investors based in Scottsdale, Arizona. Greene scoffed. Crypto? Are you serious now? Jasmine nodded once. Now I am. Because I don't think the American people expect their elected officials to be vacationing at the Phoenician on the dime of unregistered lobbyists while calling it research. She turned the page. April 2022. You were flown to Scottsdale on a private jet. Registration number N549TW. That plane belongs to a company called Orbit Holdings. The owner, Leonard March, is currently under IRS investigation for international wire fraud. That name, Leonard March, hit like a dropped chandelier. Phones went up. Pens stopped mid-sentence. You stayed 3 nights in a luxury suite, Jasmine added. I've got the invoice here. Paid in full by Orbit. Not disclosed on your financial disclosures. Not once. Greene gritted her teeth. That's not mine to disclose. He offered the stay. I didn't pay for it. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. Exactly, she said. Which is the problem? Accepting unreported gifts from individuals under federal investigation while sitting on the oversight committee isn't just shady, it's unethical. Possibly criminal. Nobody moved to interrupt. The chairman glanced down at his notes but didn't lift his pen. The room had turned into a courtroom and Jasmine had the floor. She turned the page again. May 2023. Sedona. Another private flight. This one chartered by a group of donors tied to Westbridge Energy, an oil lobbying firm based in Dallas. 2 of those donors had cases pending before the Environmental Affairs Subcommittee. The blow landed hard. Greene stood abruptly. Stop it. Now you're twisting everything. Her voice cracked. You know how this works. Members get offers. We make appearances. This is normal. Jasmine didn't step back. She raised her hand gently. It's not the appearance, she said. It's the pattern. The same names, the same jets, the same hotels, and no disclosures. She stepped away from the mic, her voice softening but gaining power. Let me ask you something, Congresswoman, she said, pausing just long enough. Why did you meet with Nicholas Averill, the CEO of Westbridge, 3 weeks after voting against the Clean Water Accountability Act? Greene blinked. I didn't meet him. You were photographed with him on the terrace at El Encanto, Jasmine replied calmly. It was posted and deleted. She nodded toward the clerk, who slid a printed screenshot down the table. The image made its way around the room like fire. Greene, in sunglasses, beside a man holding a whiskey glass. His lapel badge read, Nicholas A. Jasmine let the room look. You didn't know the camera was watching, she said, but the internet never forgets. Greene tried to form a sentence but failed. Her mouth opened, then closed. She reached for her water but didn't drink it. Jasmine didn't press. She let the silence speak. This isn't about partisanship, she said at last. It's about trust. You've built your platform on being anti-elite, anti-corruption, anti-establishment. But what happens when that mask falls off? The silence in the room wasn't respectful, it was chilling. Greene didn't speak. She sat like a statue, flushed and flinching beneath the lights. But the noise outside didn't stop. In fact, it only got louder. Cable networks were already breaking into scheduled programming. The hearing clip was spreading faster than anyone inside that chamber could contain. Jasmine wasn't just exposing misconduct. She was forcing the system to confront itself. But she wasn't done. She picked up one last file. This one didn't have many pages, but it didn't need to. The first page alone would be enough. Jasmine turned to the chairman. There's one more document I waited to verify, she said. And now that I have, I believe the committee and the public deserve to see it. She opened the manila folder and placed a draft agreement on the table. This is a draft contract, she said, between Representative Greene and Ridge Hill Partners, a Nevada-based investment group. It's dated February 2023, 2 weeks before she introduced legislation designed to lower capital gains taxes on private energy holdings. Audible gasps rose from the room. Jasmine held up the page. The letterhead showed both names, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ridge Hill. This document includes language requesting ongoing advocacy for deregulation measures in exchange for undisclosed financial equity in a subsidiary, Horizon Aggregate Ventures, a firm with deep holdings in fracking operations across the Midwest. Greene stood again, shouting, "That's a fake. That's not even my signature." Jasmine didn't raise her voice. "We had it reviewed by an independent forensic analyst," she said. The signature matches 5 separate documents filed with the Georgia Secretary of State. Greene's skin turned ghostly. From the back of the room, a reporter whispered, "That's game." Jasmine continued, "The deal never went public, and the legislation she introduced didn't pass. But that doesn't change what this is: an agreement to trade influence for personal gain." Nobody replied, not even Greene's attorney, who leaned over to whisper something into her ear. Her hands were still, her face unreadable. "You don't know what you're doing," Greene said finally, voice barely audible. "You're burning the whole house down for what? A headline?" Jasmine inhaled slowly. "No," she said, "for accountability." The chairman cleared his throat. "Representative Crockett, are you formally requesting that this document be submitted to the House Ethics Committee?" Jasmine nodded once. "Yes," she said, "along with the full binder of accompanying records. They've been uploaded to a secure congressional server and made available to all committee members." The clerk stepped forward and took the folder. A camera shutter snapped. Outside, people watching live reacted in real time. Comment sections exploded. Even conservative anchors paused mid-script, unsure how to spin what they'd just seen. Back inside, Greene sat back down slowly. Her hands didn't move, her face didn't twitch, because something had changed. This was no longer a hearing. This was a reckoning, and it had her name on it. Outside the hearing room, the world was already in motion. Headlines flashed across screens in homes and office lobbies. Hashtags surged. Hashtag Crockett exposes. Hashtag Packgate. Hashtag Greene collapse. People who had never watched a congressional hearing were now glued to screens, not for drama but for something else, clarity. Inside the Capitol, the chaos was no longer confined to one room. It was seeping into every hallway, bleeding into whispered conversations, emails marked urgent, aides darting between offices with worried faces. Jasmine Crockett, however, did not rush. She gathered her folders calmly, nodded at the clerk, and walked out without acknowledging the stir behind her. 3 different aides approached her at once asking if she'd issue a hallway statement. She gave them all the same answer: not yet. Marjorie Taylor Greene, on the other hand, was pacing just around the corner. Her voice, though lowered, still carried its sharp edges. "You don't let a junior congresswoman come in here and try to smear me," she growled at her aide, a sharp-eyed man gripping his phone like a lifeline. This whole thing was a setup. Somebody's behind her. "I want names." The aide nodded briskly. "We're trying to get ahead of it. We've got a statement drafted blaming political weaponization, deep state spin, the usual." "Should we release it now?" "Not yet," Greene snapped. "And tell Tucker I'll do the show tonight. 10 minutes, no fluff." Meanwhile, Jasmine walked past a cluster of staffers, most of whom went quiet the moment they saw her. She made eye contact with none of them, except one. A young black intern, maybe 19 or 20, gave her a look that was more than admiration. It was gratitude. Jasmine offered a brief, knowing smile and kept walking. 2 floors up, in a quieter hallway, Representative Alan Dorsey from Oregon was already on a call with his chief of staff. "We've got to distance," he said, his voice flat but urgent. "I don't care what she meant to the base. This is about to go nuclear." The staffer asked, "You think the files are real?" Dorsey didn't hesitate. She read them too smoothly. That wasn't theater. That was strategy. On Independence Avenue, satellite trucks were parked bumper to bumper. CNN, MSNBC, Fox. They all had microphones clipped and countdowns running. Inside a side conference room, Greene sat with her comms director and one of her lawyers. The room was still except for the low hum of fluorescent lights. "What's worst case?" she asked, eyes fixed on a single spot on the table. Her lawyer, an older man with a salt and pepper beard, took a slow breath. "If Crockett's documents are real, and if she pushes for a formal ethics inquiry, we're talking censure at minimum. FEC violations, IRS red flags, possibly DOJ interest." Greene didn't speak. The words just sat there. "What about public support?" the comms director asked, her voice sharp. "We'll keep the base," Greene said, not looking up. "They don't care about PAC names or flight numbers. They care that I fight." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "They care until it starts to look like you lied." Back in a quiet office tucked behind the hearing room, Jasmine sat with her chief of staff, sipping lukewarm coffee. Her aide looked at her cautiously. "You know they're going to say this was a takedown," he said. "They'll call you a plant, a puppet. All of it." Jasmine smiled faintly, but there was weight behind it. "They can say whatever they want," she replied. "When I look people in the eye back home, I'll be able to say one thing with certainty." Her aide raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Jasmine looked up. "I told the truth, and I told it with receipts." Truth, however, is not a shield from retaliation. Greene's team was already strategizing. The hearing had gone off script, but the campaign response wouldn't. By morning, press releases were drafted, allies were briefed, and appearances scheduled. But Jasmine didn't do any of that. She didn't appear on late-night talk shows or cable panels. She didn't hold a press conference. Her team issued only a single post on her congressional site. A thank you to constituents and a note reaffirming her commitment to transparency. That silence spoke louder than a dozen interviews. And it worked. The media didn't need her to speak. The people were speaking for her. By the second day, Greene's office looked more like a bunker than a workspace. Staffers whispered in corners, blinds were closed, phones rang non-stop. Her chief of staff stood by the copier punching buttons like it owed him something. "Is she coming in?" one aide asked. "She's still in the conference room," another replied. On with legal again. Inside that room, Greene was hunched over a speakerphone, surrounded by documents, half-empty coffee cups, and tired faces. "She's not backing down," said the attorney. "She's holding the line, and she's doing it smart. No leaks, no sound bites, just evidence. That's dangerous." Greene exhaled slowly. "So what do I do?" "You don't resign," the lawyer replied. "But you also don't go live again. Every time you speak, you bleed. We need a written statement, carefully worded." Greene shook her head. "I don't do careful. You do now," he said flatly. In the Capitol cafeteria, 2 junior aides from different offices traded glances. "She was always loud," one said. "But now she's quiet," the other nodded. "That's how you know it's real." Jasmine, meanwhile, kept working. She took calls, answered emails, showed up to meetings. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile for the cameras. She didn't have to. Her work had already spoken. And more importantly, people had listened. Letters began to arrive. Hundreds at first, then thousands. From voters, from students, from women who saw in her not just a congresswoman, but a mirror. Not a symbol, but a signal. That maybe, just maybe, truth still mattered. By the end of the week, the system began to respond. Not with sweeping action, not with fireworks, but with something quieter and far more consequential. A bipartisan group within the House committee began reviewing the documents Jasmine Crockett had submitted. It wasn't a formal investigation. Not yet, but it was a signal. The kind of signal that in Washington doesn't require headlines. Just movement. Quiet, deliberate movement. The kind that gets noticed by the people who count. One by one, Greene's allies began pulling back. Some issued vague statements about the importance of due process. Others dodged reporters entirely. Only the most fringe voices remained loud, shouting about conspiracies and weaponization and deep state theatrics. But their volume couldn't erase what was now undeniable. No one had disproved a single document Jasmine presented. Not one. Then it happened. 3 Republican members, men who had stood beside Greene on policy, campaign stops, even interviews, quietly requested an internal ethics review be opened. It was a political earthquake, because that kind of move didn't come from pressure. It came from self-preservation. They weren't protecting her anymore. They were protecting themselves. Greene's team scrambled. 2 days later, they released a written statement. No apology, no concession, just a defiant claim that Jasmine Crockett was weaponizing the process to smear true patriots. But it landed flat. The narrative had shifted, and it wasn't coming back. Editorial boards across the country published columns, not just about scandal, but about truth. About trust, about the rare, almost forgotten value of integrity. And back in Greene's own district, a local poll showed her approval rating had dropped 20 points in 7 days. 20 points. At a Rotary Club in Macon, a former donor stood and addressed a quiet room. I don't care what letter is next to your name. If you lie to the people and get caught, you shouldn't represent them. The fallout wasn't just political. It was personal. Staffers whispered about jumping ship. Donors stopped returning calls. Lobbyists developed sudden scheduling conflicts. And Jasmine? She stayed quiet, focused, grounded. She hadn't destroyed Greene with insults or gotcha moments. She'd done it with paperwork, with poise, with precision. And the country noticed. Universities began reaching out. Georgetown, Howard, Berkeley, not to turn her into a hero, but to ask her to speak. To explain what it meant to lead with evidence, not ego. She always gave the same message. Don't confuse loud with right. Do your homework. Never walk into a room afraid of the facts. Letters poured into her office. Some from high school students who'd never heard of her before the hearing. Others from retired educators, military veterans, single mothers, pastors, postal workers. You stood there and showed what grace under fire looks like, one letter read. You reminded us why we pay attention. TikTok remixes turned her quote, "I told the truth and I told it with receipts," into choruses layered over beats. Teenagers who couldn't define oversight committee now quoted Jasmine in videos. Cable news anchors scrambled to keep up. Some tried to spin the hearing into partisan warfare, but viewers weren't buying it. The evidence had been too specific, the documents too crisp, the silence from Greene's camp too damning. At a town hall in Garland, Texas, Jasmine took the stage to a standing room only crowd. No campaign banners, no slogans, just voters, young and old, black, Latino, white, waiting to hear the woman who had gone toe-to-toe with one of the loudest voices in Congress and never flinched. She stepped to the mic and looked out across the crowd. Her voice was soft, but firm. "I'm not here to talk about scandals or headlines," she said. "I'm here to talk about what comes next. Because what happened in that hearing room wasn't about one person. It was about all of us. About what we allow in our politics. And whether we still care enough to ask, is this honest? Is this fair? Is this who we want to be?" She let the silence settle like dust in sunlight. Then added, "Power without truth is just noise. And we've had enough noise." The applause wasn't thunderous, it was steady. Real, a rising rhythm of people who felt, maybe for the first time in a long time, that someone was speaking their language. Later that night, back in her apartment, Jasmine sat alone at her kitchen table. The binder from the hearing was still in her bag. She hadn't opened it since. She didn't need to. She knew what it said. The truth didn't need a microphone. It had already been heard. The hearing resumed the next morning under a different sky. Capitol Hill looked the same on the outside, but inside, something had shifted. Something you could feel in the way staffers clutched their folders tighter, in how early the members arrived, and in how the cameras were already rolling before the chairman even took his seat. It wasn't just a proceeding anymore. It was a spectacle. Satellite trucks lined the block. Commentators on every channel speculated about what Jasmine Crockett would do next. Some predicted silence, others hoped for escalation, but few expected what she actually brought. One last document, sealed in a manila folder, calm as the hand that carried it. When the chairman granted her the floor, Jasmine stood slowly. There was no bravado in her voice, only clarity. "Yesterday, I presented documentation tied to campaign violations and unreported gifts," she began. "But there is one more file I waited to verify." She placed the folder on the table, opened it carefully, and slid a document toward the clerk. "This is a draft agreement between Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene and a Nevada-based investment group, Ridge Hill Partners. It's dated February 2023. 2 weeks before she introduced legislation to lower capital gains taxes on private energy holdings." The room exhaled as one. Jasmine held up the first page, the bold letterhead unmistakable. Greene's name and Ridge Hills. "This agreement," she continued, "includes language requesting Representative Greene's continued advocacy for deregulation measures in exchange for undisclosed financial equity in Horizon Aggregate Ventures, a fracking subsidiary with operations across the Midwest." Chairs creaked, phones rose, reporters whispered. Greene stood abruptly, her face pale. "That's a fake," she shouted. "That's not even my signature." Jasmine didn't even blink. "We had it reviewed by an independent forensic analyst," she said. "The signature matches 5 separate filings with the Georgia Secretary of State. It was surgical, and it was final." The gasps weren't just from the public gallery. They came from inside the committee itself. Greene's lawyers murmured among themselves. One leaned close and whispered in her ear. She pulled back, her face crumbling. "You don't know what you're doing," she muttered toward Jasmine, her voice cracking. "You're burning the whole house down for what? A headline?" Jasmine met her gaze and answered with the force of a generation behind her. "No, for accountability." The chairman asked, "Are you formally requesting that this be submitted to the House Ethics Committee?" Jasmine nodded once. "Yes, along with all accompanying records, which are now uploaded to a secure congressional server and available to all committee members." The clerk walked forward and took the file. The cameras didn't blink. The room, for a moment, forgot to breathe. Even Greene's staunchest defenders sat motionless, staring forward. She didn't shout. She didn't protest. She just sat. because there was nothing left to say. Outside, the clip exploded across every platform. YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, even conservative strongholds like talk radio and alt-media forums couldn't ignore it. In one barbershop in Shreveport, the TV above the mirrors flickered as a CNN chyron read, "Greene under ethics fire." Curtis, the owner, paused mid-trim and muttered, "Man, she cooked her on live TV. That ain't politics, that's surgery." In Iowa, two retired teachers at a diner didn't argue. One just said, "She looked guilty." Didn't even try to deny it. The other nodded, tried yelling. Didn't work this time. It became that kind of moment. One that bypasses filters and feeds and goes straight to the gut. One that people don't just watch, they feel. Clips of Jasmine's composure flooded timelines. Her quote, "I'm not here to perform. I'm here to ask questions the public deserves answers to," was printed on t-shirts, turned into audio reels, and quoted by high school seniors in debate clubs across the country. Even her critics had trouble spinning it. They tried digging up old footage, controversial tweets, but nothing stuck. Because Jasmine hadn't yelled, she hadn't mocked, she hadn't twisted, she'd shown the receipts and stood her ground. Congressional offices were flooded with calls, some demanding Greene resign, others demanding Jasmine run, but most just asked, "What's going to happen now?" The Speaker's office declined comment, but insiders leaked what everyone already suspected. A formal inquiry was in motion. By Monday, the House Ethics Committee confirmed it. Quietly, no press conference, just a notice of review. But it landed like a thunderclap. Greene's inner circle shut down. Legal teams called in. Travel plans were canceled. Appearances postponed. And through it all, Jasmine Crockett remained still. She declined interviews. She skipped the press circuit. She didn't tour cable studios. Instead, she went home to Dallas and showed up at her district office like she always did. That Friday, she sat in on a housing complaint meeting with senior residents. No cameras, no aides, just people. "You're not tired?" her aide asked afterward. Jasmine smiled. "I'm always tired," she said. "But I'm not done." The message spread. Do your homework. Tell the truth. Show the receipts. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. But it was honest. And honesty, when wielded without fear, is a kind of power that reshapes the room. That's what Jasmine Crockett did. Not with noise, with proof, not with performance, with purpose. And the country, reeling from years of deflection and spectacle, finally saw something different. Accountability that didn't have to shout to be heard. And that, more than any headline, any viral clip, or any political fallout, was what stayed with people. Not the scandal, not the shouting, but the moment someone, finally, just told the truth.